Hi, in this walkthrough, I'm going to show you a slightly different way of connecting a Wix website to Make. And this is inspired by a video I did to show how you could connect a Wix website to NA10, which didn't have a native Wix connector. Now, the reason why I want to show you this is because for those of you who have followed my video on using the native Wix collector to connect your website to Make, to listen to actions and pull data, do some work, push it back in, you know that there are certain subtleties with that way of connecting, which sometimes cause you to trip over, in particular around making sure that you have the callback URLs in the right place, which is a slightly old way of authenticating an app with Wix. Now, this way of doing it is slightly more technical, doesn't use the native connector, achieves the same outcome, potentially gives you more flexibility. But again, like I said, it is not going to use the native connector. So you will have to build some of the triggers yourself. But if you're willing to go down this route, you're probably slightly more technical, and that should not really be an issue. But let me show you how to connect. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to create a scenario that makes a call to get the access token, store it, and then create a new scenario to retrieve the access token and use that to make a REST API call to get some data from the Wix website. There are some advantages to this, which I trust you can read, so I'm not going to run through those. And there are some disadvantages because, again, you're not going to be using the out-the-box events from the official Wix Make connector. You will have to work on getting those yourselves. But you may want to look at this way of connecting, as it does offer some other advantages, which I'll go through in the video. So with the Wix connector in Make, these are the out-the-box actions. And you will not have them by connecting in this way, in such a neat way. However, you can do all of these, and you will need to use the REST API in order to do that. So if you're comfortable with all of that, go further. If not, please stick with the native Wix connector, because all of this stuff in here, if you're just going to be doing simple automations based on some of these triggers, please use that, because that will be simpler, even though some of the nuances of connecting might be a little bit fiddly, I think is probably the correct term. So let's start. What I am going to assume you have already done is that you have already created the self-hosted app and installed it on your site in a way that you will be able to get the app ID, app secret, and app instance ID. In the documentation, in the description of this video, there will be links to my walkthroughs of how to do that. So please follow that before you start this step. The reason why we're doing this is by installing and creating our own self-hosted Wix app into our Wix websites, we will be able to control the access to the data in the Wix website in the way that Wix want us to. While it is possible to get it directly from your site, that road leads to lowering your site performance and also potentially being less secure. So this is the best way of doing it. So once you've got that all set up, then follow the next steps, which I'm going to show you in Make. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a call to create an access token using this endpoint and this information. I'll guide you through it. And then once you have the access token, you can then use any API call to get data from your site and do actions on your site. And you might want that level of granularity. So that is why I'm recording this. There's some things in the documentation which are wrong, and I will go through those and highlight those as well. Now, to get the access token, we need to make a HTTP request. Here's one I prepared earlier, but I'm going to show it to you step by step so that you fully understand what is going on. The intention of these recordings is to make them accessible to non-technical users, so I will be explaining it and perhaps over-explaining it, especially if you're technical. So please just jump ahead or watch this at double speed. What I want you to do is go in and choose the HTTP module in Make. Ignore all of this. You might think that you need to do auth2 request, but that is not going to work. Just click Make a Request. And then here's a little trick. It'll say that you need to connect automatically because you've got other modules. Just drag this over, and then you will get the basic form that you need to fill in. Now, here's what we need to do here. This is one of those instances where having a huge monitor comes into its own. So on the right-hand side, I've got the authentication example, and here's what we're going to do. So I'm going to go through this step by step, just teach you a little bit about how to read these curl statements. So the first bit, the -x, tells you how you need to connect and where you need to connect to. So first bit, post. And then I need to connect to here to get the token. So copy that and put it in. That's the first bit. Then the next bit tells you what you need in the header. So this is the -h. And you need to put in content type application. So let's add a header. And you take content type, everything before the colon, you don't need it. Anything after, and then application JSON. I'm just copying and pasting because that's what you would probably do. So that's the headers done. And then after this, the -d stands for data. So that is basically the data you are going to send. All that we need to send is data, so raw. Again, content type, application JSON, because we're sending the data in JSON format. And then I suggest you just copy all of what is in there. So let's just take that and put that in here. And let's get rid of this little thing. So this is what it's expecting in the call. And you need to put in the client ID, the client secret, and the instance ID. And you'll learn how to get all of those from the video I made earlier. I'm going to pause while I do that because you don't want to watch me do all of that, but I'm going to put it all in. So here you go, all done. I've put in all the relevant IDs. Let's just save that. And let's run this module only, check it all works. And it does work because you get down here, zoom in, this response, access token, and that is what we want. Now, using this access token, you will be able to then make a curl. With that access token, you'll be able to make a call and retrieve information from your website and perform actions on the website. You just need the access token, but not how they have shown it here. This documentation is wrong. I'll come to that in a second. Now, the other thing that will work is, for example, you've done this request and you've got an access token, but the access token is valid for 4 hours. So if you think about it, if you're going to connect to your site in this way, let's say you have 3 or 4 scenarios, or in our use case, we've got close to 15. You'd be making this access call every time you run those scenarios, which is wholly inefficient. So I am going to show you a way of storing it. Depending on which version of Make you have, I believe that even the lowest versions of Make have the data store available to you. You should be able to run it. So what we're looking at doing is we make the request, we store it, we know that it lasts for 4 hours. We then turn on the scenario and we say, run this scenario every 3.5 hours. So we will have a working access token all the time in a data store. So I'm just going to do that next so you can see how that works. So go on the left-hand side of Make, click on Data Stores, just add a data store. Click Add Structure, give it a name. Let's call it Token. That's it. We just need one. Save. Now, if you've not worked with Make data stores, they are incredibly powerful to keep values of certain data persistent across scenarios. So this is a prime example. So let me just show you how they work. Let's just browse this one that we've just done. You will see that there are 2 columns in this data set, a key and the token field that we literally just created. The key is what allows you to look up items, and in the token column is the value of that item. So what the key does is simply identify which row. So think of it like Excel. In Excel, you have row 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then you have a value, like let's say first names, John, Jane, Tom. And it's exactly the same way of thinking about it. The key is your way of identifying the row, and the token is the value we want. So enough of that. Let's go back to this building that scenario. Now, after we have this request and we get that result, just go and select the data store module. You want the first thing, add or replace a record. Then choose the data store you've just created, which in our case is WIX current token. And then put in a key. Let's just be straightforward and call it. Keys are case sensitive, by the way. And then the token is the result of this module, which was this thing here. Save. And let's run it once. There you go. That's all you need to do. Now in production, you want to turn this on, run at regular intervals, and you want to run it just under 4 hours because the token you get expires every 4. So we run it every 220 minutes. That's it. And activate the scenario. Save changes. All done. So in summary, what this scenario is doing is just sitting there in Make every 4 hours, or just under 4 hours, gets you a new token, and puts it into the data store. And because the key is always the same, you will always have the right and active token. So let's just go to the data store and see what that looks like. So in the data store, if you browse it, you will see that you have the key called current token, and this is the access token, and it has the expiry value and everything else. And I'll show you how to now use that in your scenarios. So to show you how the connection works, all I'm going to do is I am going to run a WIX data query using the REST API, using the token that we've just got, and I'm going to retrieve the items in this example show and tell collection, which has a collection ID of example collection. When you're connecting to your site using that sort of middle app, you have to use the REST API. So what follows in the example is I am going to use, and this is just for completeness, I'm showing this to you, this data items, query data items. And that is, so we're going to use this query data items. So same thing, you do a post to this endpoint, WIX APIs, WIX data, B2 items / items query. So you're querying it. Content type, application JSON, authorization, auth, so the ID of the collection, and any query elements you want. Now, as a slight segue, the reason why we use this and it's so powerful is because hidden in here is some really useful stuff. So you go data collection ID, query, show child properties. And this is where you can really do some granular filtering. So if you've got a large collection, let's say 400, 500 items, you don't really want to be calling all of them, but you know certain things about them. You can then put in a query and say, okay, the field name 2, I want the operator, and the value operator is equal to, and the value is, let's say, I don't know, published. And that way you would just get published data or whatever the filter is that you want to apply. Let's just look at how you'd actually do this in practice. So let me not just show you what I've already done and start from scratch. So the first thing we want to do is add the data store module. And we want to get a record. So we want to get, and again, same trick. Let's just put that there. We want to get the token that we generated in that previous scenario. So we go select the data store, WIX current token, and put in the key, and our key was current token. So let's just type that in. Let's run it. And you'll see that we get this access token back. But despite what the documentation says here, when it's a content type authorization auth, and it says in the previous auth request, say you need to pass everything, it's not true. And I'll show you what works. So this is super simple. Just select the JSON module, click pass JSON, and put your token in. Save that. Let's run that so I can show you what's happening. Now you'll see that you have access to the access token, and it's split it out to say bearer type is bearer, and it expires in this many seconds. 4 hours to be exact. Now we want to add to this another HTTP request, because that is how we're going to get our information. So let's just go put this HTTP thing. Do the same thing, click make a request. And we are going to make a data call. So we're going to do a post, so X post, and we're going to post it to this endpoint items data query. So let me get the endpoint here, copy that, put that in here, make sure it's a post. And then you can see here, here's what we need in terms of the headers. We need content type at the header. And look, I'm going to add a download blueprint of this scenario, so you probably don't have to do all of this, but I'm just going through it step by step so that you know exactly how it all works. So we're going to do that. And then in the header, we want to put in the authorization. Let's add that. And we take the name that it's expecting, which is authorization, which is correct. And then here's where the documentation goes all wrong, unless you go rummaging around deep in the REST documentation to find the right thing. So what you need to do here is you need to put in bearer, because it's a bearer token, and I'm not going to go into the technicalities of what that means. And you do not want all of it. You just want the value in the access token, which comes from that second JSON module. So you just put that in, bearer access token. That's all it is. Let's save that for a second, because at the minute this is doing nothing. And what we want to do is we want to get the items from that example collection. So let me go ahead and put in what I prepared earlier, but let me just do all the steps. So body type is still raw. Content type is application JSON, and this is what we're going to push. So you can see it's a somewhat redacted version of the example here. So the data collection ID, in our case, is example collection. The query, we have not put in any filter items because there's only 2 in there. And then the limit is 2, but I can increase that to 4 if I want. Save that. And now let's run all of it, and I'll run through it all step by step. So there you go. We've got it all working. Let me zoom in. So what we've done is we've got our token from the data store. We've passed it through the JSON module, and we've got a result. So let's have a look at the result. We have got an output. We've got data. And we've got the data items in a long string format. So if you're used to using the native WIX connector, you might get a bit scared about this, but it's really simple to fix, and I'm going to just quickly show you how to do that. So what this is a JSON string. So some of you may have guessed what we're going to do next. We're just going to go past JSON again, and the result we want is this data items. Save that. Shouldn't be yeah, but we're going to run it anyway. So let's see. Right. Now that you've added this, you can see that outcomes, you've got 2, which is correct because there's only 2. And you can see the data for each one of those items. So this is a text field. The title is another item. And this one, the data is, and the title is a brand new title, and it's got more information. So we've got information from our live WIX website. Yeah, so you can carry on building out automations. Depending on the permissions you've given your connector app, you will be able to use the whole spectrum of the REST API. So you can do some really cool, sophisticated things way beyond what is available to you in the native WIX connector. But it is slightly more technical. Now, one thing to remember is When you update permissions in your connector apps, you must go in and refresh these to the new version that you have released. This way you don't have to delete and reinstall. You can just go in and simply refresh to the latest version. Now let me show you one last piece of efficiency. And whenever I make scenarios, I like to, once I've got things running in production, get rid of as many modules as I can if I see an efficiency. So there's an efficiency to be had here, and some of you who are more technical will have already realized it. And the efficiency is this. Now that we've realized by diving deep into the WIX documentation, we did that, so you don't have to. We don't need the entire thing. We just need this. So let's go back to that scenario that calls the bearer, gets us the bearer token. And let's make a small adjustment to this. So let's just go and edit that. Go in here, add a module, and I want JSON. I don't want Jasper. Don't use Jasper. Pass JSON. And the JSON string is this one. Save that. And then in here, I don't want to record data. I want to record the output of the JSON string. So yeah, in the data store, the key, current token, make sure you toggle overwrite existing record. And all we want is the access token, which is this bit here. So we've done all of that. Save that. And in here, because I know I'm going to get the right token, let me just put that in. It won't look like this. Save it. Let's run this. Transform. Yes, yes, yes. There we go. Works. Because now all we've done is recorded the token in the data store, not the whole thing. And this bearer token will work, and you will get the output as expected. So now I do realize that I have explained this step by step in real granular detail, again, because I am super conscious that a lot of the audience, those of you who have subscribed, may not be overly technical. So I've gone a little bit deeper than perhaps I needed to. So I intentionally left everything in just to show you everything that comes back, to show you that WIX documentation is slightly erroneous and this is the right way of doing it. So again, if you choose to connect to WIX in this way, it works. It's super robust. But you can see that you're going to have to do a little bit more work at the end of it, because you're going to have to map things through this JSON field. And for those of you who want to take it a little bit further, there is a really neat way of using data stores, especially if you're working through things in an interim way, or you have certain collections which you know you're going to reference, updated a lot in WIX. You can put them in as local data stores on Make, and that becomes super useful. I hope you find this useful, and I will see you on the next walkthrough.